My name is Joe, and I'll be walking you through creating a basic MadLibs game based on one of the Dash tutorials created by General Assembly and provided to the students to help them ramp up for any one of the web development courses that they offer. Now, I myself had gone through the Dash tutorials when I had signed up for their front-end web development course and was so impressed with the instructor and the course content that when I finally made the decision, probably a year later, to really jump into web development, I enrolled in their web development immersive program, which is a full-time 3-month program where you learn front-end and back-end technologies. And I was so thrilled when I had the opportunity to become a teacher's assistant for their front-end web development course. And now I get to walk others or assist them through the trials and tribulations that I had struggled to overcome from the very beginning. Now, the Dash tutorials themselves are a fun and interactive way to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript through the process of creating and enhancing websites. And there's 5 of them here to walk through: building a personal website, building a responsive blog theme, small business website, CSS robot, and lastly, the MadLibs. Now, I'm also a firm believer in hands-on as the best approach towards learning, so I've gone ahead and created starter and solution code pens for the content in this video and all subsequent videos. So the links have been provided in the details section, so feel free to code along. In this particular video, the objectives that we're going to be covering are working with JavaScript arrays, how to index items in an array, and using jQuery to inject content into HTML. So before we actually get started coding, let's take a look at the final product here. What are we trying to create? So here we can see this is the final iteration. You can see that there is a sentence with what looks like some areas for collecting and displaying user prompts. So I'm going to walk you through the process real quickly, and then we'll get started. So here we have a question. We're presenting the user with a question. We're presenting them with a box to collect their input and a next button, which will walk them through the process. So I'm going to type in a name here, Joe. Let's do really cool, and then website. Here we go. And then we go next. So what we can see here is we're able to prompt the user for questions, right? Capture their input and display it at a later point in time, and have a next button that kind of walk them through the process and determine when we reach that final point where we needed to take the content and inject it into HTML. That's basically what we're trying to do. So let's get started then. I'm going to go back here. We'll get rid of these objectives, and we'll put prompts, to display the content. Now, I'm one of those people that believe when you are creating content, you should really have as many comments in your code as possible. So what I did previously was to add these 2 lines of comments, and they're going to help direct where we put our content. So the first thing that we could benefit from is using an array. And if you are familiar with any of the previous Dash tutorials, you've already been exposed to several JavaScript data types, including functions, numbers, and strings. In our MadLibs project, we're going to introduce a new data type called an array. Now, an array is like a container. It can hold 1 or more objects, and those objects themselves can include any one of the previous data types as well as arrays. So the first place we can benefit from this is using it to store our questions. So in our pseudocode, I see a placeholder for this, so I'm going to do var, and we're going to get rid of the caps, var, I'm going to call this prompts is equal to, and I'm going to just put an empty array. That's how you would create an empty array. Now, we definitely want our array to contain some questions, so I'm going to put them as a string, type name, right, a comma to indicate the next string, type we'll do single strings, type an adjective, and lastly, type a noun. Okay, so now that we have all of our content there, one of the things that we can use that an array does contain are properties. And one of those that we can make use of here is its length property. So if we go ahead and console log prompts.length, we should see here the number 3 displayed. Okay, great. Well, we know that we have 3 objects here in our array, so that makes sense that we would see 3. Okay, so I'm going to clear that. Now, if we wanted to, we could see all of the objects inside of the array by just console logging prompts. But what if we wanted to see just the first, maybe the last, or any one of those items in between? Well, this is done by referencing the item's position in the array. Now that position is put inside of brackets, and what we should see here, it should return what we would, under normal circumstances, assume is the first object, but what we can tell is it's not the first object. It's actually the second object we're seeing here. So type an adjective is the second object. The first one is type a name. Now what you were expecting is that, well, one thing you need to know is that arrays use ordinal counting, which means 0 represents the starting position. Okay, so if we want to reference the first position, we need to use 0. So if we change that to 0, then we see it returns the first question. Great. Okay, so our next goal now that we know that we have these prompts and that we can access any one of those prompts within the array, we need to use jQuery to actually inject the prompt into the HTML. So before we do that, what we're going to do here is I have this div called class prompt, right? And what we can see here is there some text prompt will be displayed here. And what we're going to use is jQuery to capture that class of prompt, right? And then we're going to use its HTML method to output that first question onto the screen. And there you have it. So we have type a name. If we wanted to see the second question, just change that to 1. And of course the third question, we change that to 2. Great. So I'm going to set that back to 0. All right, so there you have it. This concludes phase 1 of our project. And in this video, you learned what an array is, how to use the array's length property, and that arrays use ordinal counting to store the items, and that the very first position is referenced as 0. And of course, the last objective was to use jQuery's HTML method to push the content into HTML, which we did as well. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.